Yes. Let me turn on the laser pointer. Okay, we are good to go. Okay, so hello all of you. Good evening. Welcome to another live problem solving session for the course Introduction to Semiconductor Devices, which is being conducted by Professor Naresh Kumar Imani. Just to introduce myself again, I am Soham Lakhote, currently a fourth year PhD student at IISc Bangalore, working under Professor Gaurav Banerjee in the area of analog and RF circuits and systems. So now, just for the formality sake, we will have a session for first 50 or 60 minutes. Then we will take a short break of maybe 5 minutes, and then again we will resume our session. And just for the sake of what you can say, just for the sake of telling, all the diagrams which I have taken over here, most of them have been taken from the Professor Donald Demon's book, as well as you will be seeing that I have taken many screenshots from the lecture material itself. And apart from these two sources, if any diagrams are there, I may have referenced those, so you can go back to those websites or and just look at those diagrams again if you want, if you have any interest. And I hope all of you are able to access the recordings as well as the lecture slides. So this is a YouTube channel where I am uploading all the recordings, and in the description section of each YouTube video you will be able to see a link for the presentation folder. So in that presentation folder all the lecture notes are being uploaded. Okay, so now let's see what we have studied in this week. So in the last week we have seen was about everything about the MOSFET, like scaling and all. We had also derived the current equation. We saw some short channel effects. Now we are switching, and we are switching to what? We are switching to optoelectronic devices. So the first question that you should ask me is, why should I study the optoelectronic devices, and why there is so much of need to have this topic included in the semiconductors course. So let's first build the motivation, then we will cover a few concepts which will help us to solve few problems. I have around 6 or 7 problems with me, so we will try to solve all of them in this 2-hour session. Okay, so now you guys always complain, right? So the textbook is outdated and we don't teach the current state of the art, correct? So now let me teach you the state of the art. So everybody, every one of you must have heard about the ChatGPT, correct? So by taking the example of ChatGPT itself, I will tell you the need for the optoelectronic devices. So now this ChatGPT, you must have heard it, during its training it consumed around something like 1.2 or 1.4 giga hours watt of power. That is equal to almost the power that a average United States household consumes for an year. And if you multiply that number by 120, I mean 120 households consuming the power for the year, that much of the power ChatGPT consumed alone while training its model, correct? So now where is this ChatGPT hosted? See, it requires a lot of hardware, right? It requires a lot of hardware, and you just cannot store it in a memory card or something like that. Just to give you an example, it used around 2,85,000 processor cores and 10,000 graphic cards, correct? So now you need a very big data, you need a very big area, so that you can connect all these processors as well as the GPUs in parallel manner, and you can get the necessary computing that is required, correct? So now this ChatGPT, the what you can say, the model running behind it is currently hosted in the Microsoft Azure's data center that is present in the Texas. And now if you go have a look inside this data center, you will see multiple parallel racks, which will I'm just showing a screenshot of one of the racks over here. You will see multiple of them running in parallel. Now what are these cables that you are seeing over here? So all these blue cables that you are seeing, these are the optical fiber cables, correct? So first of all, you know, optical fiber cables, they carry the signal in the form of a light, correct? Now first question that we should ask is, why do we need an optical fiber cable to run the data between multiple processors and the GPUs, correct? So now this is the explanation that I have written over here, a very short explanation, correct? So as the need for data is growing exponentially, correct? So now we also need a very huge amount of computing resources. Just to give you an example, just look at this number. If you think that ChatGPT was a small one, correct? So this 2,85,000 cores is not a joke at all, correct? So now, as the data required to train the neural networks, as well as the size of these neural networks on which this ChatGPT and other stuff is running, correct? So as they grow exponentially, we also need huge computing resources. If we need the huge computing resources, that means we need to have multiple CPUs and the GPUs that are running in parallel to give the necessary computing power. If we have the increase in the number of CPUs and GPUs, that means the amount of data, that is the amount of output that the CPUs and GPUs they will generate, even that is gonna grow exponentially. Correct? So now the output of this, that is the computed output of these CPUs and GPUs, even that is growing exponentially. Correct? So I need to make sure that the data, that is the output of these CPUs and GPUs, I am able to move it as quick as possible between to wherever place I want to send. Where can I send? Of course I can send the computed data to a storage device, or maybe I can send the data from one of the CPUs to other GPU as well. Correct? So I want to make sure that the data flow that is happening in that data center, it is as quick as possible. Correct? So the copper cables that we traditionally use, and you all must have seen, correct? So they have the low bandwidth. And what are the consequences of the low bandwidth? So I don't know whether you have studied the Shannon's capacity theorem or not. It will come in the course digital communication. Correct? If you have the low bandwidth, that means the data rate will also be limited. Correct? So now we want to extend this bandwidth so that we can transfer the data between the two CPUs or GPUs in a very fast manner. So you all know that the optical fiber cable has a huge bandwidth. Correct? These cables are responsible for carrying all the signals of the internet, right? So whenever you want to access something in the US, maybe you are running some query in the Google or something, correct? You all know that even though the signal from here may go to the base station, from that base station the signal ultimately flows to the optical fiber cables which are laid out below the sea. Correct? So I hope you have understood why, first of all, the copper cables are not preferable compared to optical fiber cables, and at least we have understood why there is a need for those optical fiber cables. They provide a very high bandwidth. You can even transmit a data rate of even 50 or 60 gigabits per second through these cables. Correct? So once this need of these optical fiber cables is completely understood, now let's try to connect the dots. Correct? I have a chat GPT over here. Correct? On the background it is running over 2,85,000 CPU cores as well as the 10,000 graphic cards, which may be from Nvidia. Correct? So it is generating the huge amount of data. So if I'm having a huge amount of data, I need to move this data very fast. Correct? If I need to move this data very fast, I have to choose a medium which will offer me a very large bandwidth. Correct? So because of that, I selected the optical fiber cables. Now since I have the optical fiber cables, I need to have a mechanism to convert my electrical signals into the light signals so that I can inject them into the optical fiber cables. And also at the receiving end, from those fiber optic cables, I would like to convert the light signals into the electrical signals. Correct? So I need devices which can convert electrical energy to light energy and light energy to electrical energy. Correct? So that's why this is where the use of the optoelectronic devices will come into the picture. Correct? So I hope this is absolutely clear why we need the optoelectronic devices. Now once that thing is clear about the optoelectronic devices and its need, now let's try to go into the technical details of it. Correct? So the first thing that we studied was optical absorption. Now why we are studying the optical absorption? So you know that when you incident a photon on this piece of semiconductor, it is gonna excite an electron from the valence band into the conduction band. Correct? Now I have to see how many of those photons that I am incidenting on the semiconductor, how many of those photons are actually generating the electron hole pair. So electron hole pair means if you shine a photon, correct, then the electron will leave from valence band, it will go into the conduction band. So there is a vacancy left behind in the valence band. So that is the creation of the hole, and the electron that is there in the conduction band, that is the free electron that you got. Correct? So you always get electrons and holes in pairs. Correct? So once that is done, then I have to see how many photons are actually generating those electron hole pairs, because these electron hole pairs will actually tell me that these electron hole pairs are the ones who is gonna constitute a current in the optoelectronic devices. Correct? So the magnitude of that current will also increase if I incident more number of photons on the piece of semiconductor. Correct? So the need for studying the optical absorption is also very clear. Correct? So now a very simple question that I have asked over here is what happens when the light energy is higher than the energy band gap. correct? So three scenarios have been shown over here. This diagram has been taken from the Donald Newman. So when the light energy is smaller than the band gap energy, you know that the light just passes through the material. When it is equal to the band gap energy, it is sufficient enough to excite an electron from the valence band into the conduction band, correct? So you got an electron hole pair. But what will happen if I have a photon whose energy is is very higher than the energy band gap, correct? We may think that it may generate 3 or 4 electron hole pairs, but that is not what happens, correct? What it does is when photon hits, it excites an electron from the valence band to conduction band, but you know that the conduction band consists of lot of states, correct? It consists of lot of states. So now what this photon will do is that it will excite an electron in the from the valence band into the state in the conduction band which is at a higher level over here, correct? And this difference that you are seeing over here, this difference, this will if you do what you can say hc by eg, then that will be equal to the wavelength of the lambda, not hc by eg. This difference I am calling as e. So this is not eg, this is e, correct? So if you just do hc by e, then you will get the wavelength of that photon actually. Now once an electron is there in the higher state of this conduction band, you know that the electron always likes to go into the state of lower energy, correct? So it will fall back to a state of lower energy in the conduction band, and the energy, correct, it has to fall from this difference, let's say E2 minus E1. So this energy difference will be dissipated in the lattice in the form of heat, correct? So do not think that when you are shining the light, one photon will generate 3-4 electron hole pairs. That generally does not happen, correct? So now we define something called as the photon flux, correct? Now why are we studying this? So the photon flux is nothing but it is telling us how many number of photons are being incidented on a given area per unit time, that is second. Now why is it so important? See, it completely makes sense, right? If I am just shining 2 photons, correct, then I may get only 2 electron hole pairs, correct, assuming all the photons are getting absorbed, okay? Now if I shine 100 photons, then of course I will expect that I will get 100 electron hole pairs, correct? So this number, this photon flux, that is number of photons that are being incidented per unit area, per unit time, it is actually telling me how many electron hole pairs I will be generating. And why is this so important? Because these generated electron hole pairs will constitute a current now, and that current I can actually use in my circuit to judge how much of the light intensity I had, correct? So that is why it is very important. And if you just look at the first statement, this first statement that I have written over here till this particular point, then this says exactly the same thing, correct? Now if I have determined the photon flux, okay, this is the number of photons that I am incidenting, correct? But each photon has an energy, correct? What is the energy? Hc by lambda, hc by lambda, correct? Lambda is the wavelength of that photon, correct? So now if I multiply this number with this energy of each photon, correct, then I will get something called as the light intensity. Its units will be always in watts per meter square. That meter can be converted into centimeter also, okay? This is what you are seeing over here. This phi, the photon flux, is being multiplied by the energy of each photon, correct? What you are getting is the power intensity or power density, correct? And its units are given in the watts per meter square. So I hope this concept of photon flux is very clear. Now we will come into this case. What this is telling us, okay, if I am shining 100 photons, correct, if I am shining 100 photons, what we had assumed previously that 100 electron hole pairs will be generated, correct? So this assumes everything to be ideal, but when I shine 100 photons, only some fraction of it will get absorbed, correct? Maybe 90, maybe 80 photons will get absorbed by the semiconductor material, and only those absorbed photons, let me just write it, out of 100 photons, 90 to 80 photons have been absorbed, and then those will generate the electron hole pairs. So I have to take this factor into account, correct? Or else all my calculations will go into the waste, correct? So what this formula is telling you is that if I incident a light, correct, if I incident a light with certain power density, correct, this power density within the semiconductor material, correct, if I shine a light from here, correct, then this power density that I had at this particular point, this is IV of 0, correct, this will start decaying exponentially, correct. And this alpha is the parameter for a material, semiconductor material. If I have a very large alpha, that means the intensity will decay very rapidly, and if I have a large alpha, that means intensity will decay very rapidly. If I have a small alpha, that means the fall of the intensity is actually gradual, it is not very deep, just like the case of large alpha, correct. Now let's look what I have written over here, correct. So what this absorption coefficient depends on. So the absorption coefficient will definitely depend on the band gap of the semiconductor material, correct. If I shine a light, correct, with E greater than Eg, correct, then of course I'm exciting the electron in the valence band to the conduction band over here, correct. But if this Eg increases, if I change the material, then what does this mean? Then the light energy is not sufficient enough to absorb the photon, correct. So now that is why you can see the absorption coefficient depends on the band gap of the material as well as the value of E over here, correct. This principle has to be satisfied for the photon to get absorbed in the semiconductor material, or else the photon will be just passing through the material, it will not get absorbed. The next thing that it depends on is the nature of the semiconductor material. What do I mean by that? Whether the semiconductor material is a direct band gap or it is indirect band gap semiconductor material, correct. So now you know this is my, if I just draw the EK diagram, this is my conduction band and this is my valence band, correct. So it is very easy for electrons from here to directly jump over here, correct. But if my diagram looks something like this, if my diagram looks something like this, then that is a very big trouble, correct, because there has to be, this is K, this is a momentum vector, this is the energy, because not only I have to go from here to here, but I also have to give an momentum vector over here. That is a very inefficient process, correct. So you will always see that for the case of direct band gap semiconductor, the absorption coefficient will be always higher. This is what I was talking about. If you look at the gallium arsenide and if you look at the silicon, the way it is rising is very sharp, correct. Just look at the slope over here, it is rising very fast. But if you look at the silicon, then it is rising gradually compared to the gallium arsenide. What is this graph? On the y-axis I have absorption coefficient, on the x-axis I have the wavelength over here, correct. So this is very much clear why the nature of the semiconductor material will give you different absorption coefficient. For the direct band gap, the absorption coefficient will increase very steeply. Now this is the first question that I had asked, why the steep increase for the gallium arsenide and indium phosphide compared to silicon and germanium. The reason is very clear, because of the direct band gap semiconductor material nature. Now the second question is, in the graph we have to ask, why does the absorption coefficient increase with the decrease in the wavelength, correct. What I am doing over here, I am decreasing the wavelength, so that means my lambda is decreasing, and you can trace this silicon curve over here, correct. You can see for smaller values of lambda, the absorption coefficient is very high, but if I look at some larger values of lambda, the absorption coefficient is pretty low over here, correct. So now based on the flowchart that I have drawn over here, can any one of you please answer what is actually happening when I decrease the lambda? Why the absorption coefficient is actually absorption coefficient increases when I decrease the lambda? Can any one of you please tell me? Just look at the flowchart. Yes, very good. So what is actually happening is, when we decrease the lambda, the photon energy is actually increasing, correct. And if you look at the flowchart, the absorption coefficient definitely depends on the photon energy, and as the photon energy increases more compared to the Eg, correct, Eg is remaining constant. If my photon energy keeps on increasing, then definitely the absorption coefficient is going to be higher, correct. So very good answer. Now coming to the third question, for a given wavelength, why the absorption coefficient of, this is not off, this is not if, this is off, correct. Why the absorption coefficient of the germanium is higher than the silicon, correct. So based on the same answer that was given by the previous student, so you know the germanium's band gap is close to maybe I don't remember exactly, maybe 0.68 or 0.7 eV. just correct me if I'm wrong, okay? The silicon is around 1.12 eV. Now if I again go back to the flow chart, right? So the Eg, for the case when the Eg is lower, then the energy, the difference between the photon energy and the material whose energy band gap is smaller, so that difference is going to increase, correct? That means photon has more energy compared to the energy band gap. So again the absorption coefficient should be higher for the material whose energy band gap is lower, correct? So germanium has a lower band gap energy over here, correct? So we expect that for the same energy of the photon, that is for the same wavelength lambda of the photon, now I can expect that the absorption coefficient for the germanium will be higher than the silicon because the band gap is smaller over here, correct? So now if I look at the germanium over here, if I just draw a vertical line, why am I drawing the vertical line? To compare the absorption coefficient at the same wavelength of the light, correct? You can see the silicon is here and the germanium is here, correct? So I hope that part is clear why the absorption coefficient of germanium is higher, right? Now once we have studied this, all the absorption coefficient all, now we actually want to see how it is getting converted to the generation of the electron hole pairs, correct? Now you have studied the photon flux, correct? Photon flux you have already studied. Now how did I define the photon flux? So number of photons that we are incidenting per unit area per second, correct? So now if I have a light having a intensity maybe IV of X, what are its units? Watts per meter square, correct? Now if I divide this by the energy of each photon, Hc by lambda, correct, then what will I get? Then I will get this photon flux over here. How am I saying that? Because this is energy, the numerator is power, correct? There is a factor of time between the power and energy, that's why you got a unit of time over here, correct? So now once we got the number of photons, all of them are not going to get absorbed, correct? All of them are not going to get absorbed. I have to include the absorption coefficient over here to actually tell, okay, only these many photons are getting absorbed by the semiconductor material, and only those photons which are getting absorbed will be responsible for the generation of electron and hole pairs, correct? So now this IV of X divided by h mu is nothing but Hc by lambda, which is energy of the incident light, correct? This is nothing but the photon flux, that is the number of photons, and if I multiply it by the absorption coefficient, I will get the generation rate, that is the generation rate of the electron hole pairs because of the absorbed photons, correct? So remember this formula, we will be extensively using it while solving the numericals today, correct? Alpha into the power density divided by the energy of each photon, correct? Now let's start solving some problems, correct? So now what we will do, we will go into this problem number 1, and now we will see what they are actually asking in the question. A photon flux with the intensity 0.1 watt per centimeter square at a wavelength of 1 micrometer is incident on the surface of the silicon. Assume that the absorption coefficient of the silicon at 1 micrometer wavelength is 100 per centimeter. What is the steady state excess carrier concentration if the excess minority carrier lifetime is 10 to the power minus 7 seconds, correct? So now before solving this numerical, let me just clear one more concept. This is the generation rate, correct? This is the generation rate. Now if I want to calculate the excess carrier concentration, I have to multiply this by the carrier lifetime. Now why I have to multiply this by carrier lifetime? Just look at the units over here. This is number of photons per meter square per second. There is a second that is involved in the denominator over here, correct? But I want the concentration. Of the excess carriers. So I have to get rid of this second, the time that you are seeing over here, correct? So the electron hole pairs that we are generating, they will not remain forever. The carrier lifetime tells us that this is the average time these electron hole pairs will sustain in the semiconductor, after which they will start to recombine, correct? I don't see, when I want to detect the light, correct, whatever electron hole pairs that I am generating because of the shining of the light on the semiconductor material, I want to get out those electrons and holes, correct? I don't want them to recombine. If they recombine, then I won't be able to detect the light, correct? If they start to recombine, then what is the use of having this kind of photo generation, correct? I want to get these electrons out of the material so that I can at least convert that light energy into electrical energy, correct? So that is why we are multiplying with the carrier lifetime over here. So if you multiply G with the carrier lifetime, correct, G tau P or tau N, correct, then what you will get is the excess carrier concentration. Excess carrier concentration, correct? I hope till this point it is very much clear. If you guys have any doubts, then please feel free to poke me at any point. So now once this concept is clear, now let's see how we can proceed ahead with the question. So the first point is we have to calculate the generation rate. Once we calculate the generation rate, then we will multiply it with the excess minority carrier lifetime to get the excess carrier concentration, correct? So now absorption coefficient is given as 100 to me. 100 into this unit is 0.1 watts per centimeter square, correct, divided by what I have to do, this is h mu, right? This is hc by lambda, correct? This is hc by lambda. So now what is, how to calculate this? So sir must have told you this is nothing but 1.24 electron volts upon lambda in mu, lambda in micrometer, correct? So this is what we have to do. So hc by lambda I can consider 1.24 divided by lambda in micrometers is 1 micrometer only. But since this unit is in electron volts, I have to multiply it with the charge of an electron. So this will be my generation rate, correct? So now what will be this generation rate will come out to be? This generation rate, if you calculate, it will come out to be around 5.04 into 10 to the power 19, correct, per centimeter cube per second. Now why did per centimeter cube came? Because this per centimeter cube came because we have watts, 0.1 watts per centimeter square over here, correct, and the unit of alpha is per centimeter, correct? So that's how you got this per centimeter cube. So we got the generation rate. Now our job is to get the excess carrier concentration, that is delta N equal to delta P. Why both of them are equal? Because you generate the electron and holes in a pair, correct? Now this is nothing but G dash into tau that has been given to me. So if I just multiply 5.04 into 10 to the power 19 with this carrier lifetime of 10 to the power minus 7, correct, then the excess carrier concentration that I will be getting, it will come out to be around 5.04 into 10 to the power 12 per centimeter cube. So this is the answer that you will be getting. I hope it is very much clear. Do not get confused with the units. If this was given in watts per meter square, you had to convert this absorption coefficient unit also into per meter, correct? Or you can do one thing, you can convert this to watts per centimeter square and you can have the answer to be coming out in per centimeter cube, correct? So I hope this is very much clear. So the correct answer for this question is the option number, the last option basically, correct? So I hope it is very much clear. If you have any doubts, please feel free to poke me. Now we will be moving on to the next numerical. An n-type gallium arsenide sample has a minority carrier lifetime of 2 into 10 to the power minus 7 second, correct? Incident photons with the energy 1.65 electron volt generate an excess carrier concentration of 5 into 10 to the power 15 per centimeter cube at the surface of the semiconductor. So now the first question they are asking is, determine the incident power required. This is what they are asking, IV of x. So what they have done is delta N, correct, equal to delta P is equal to G dash into tau P. This is equal to what? Alpha into IV of 0 divided by HC by lambda. Why IV of 0? Because I am looking at the surface of the semiconductor, correct? So this is what I am representing at the surface of the semiconductor. This will be the amount of power that I will be incidenting to generate an excess carrier concentration, which is also generated at the surface of the semiconductor. Now what they have given? They have given this del N, correct? They have also, let me just check what they have given. The HC by lambda value they have already given to me, correct? one more thing, alpha they have not given, but we can actually calculate. From where will I calculate the alpha value? Correct. So the alpha value, you have to calculate the wavelength from here. Correct. See, this is hc by lambda, no? This is equal to what? 1.56 ev. So if you just take 1.65 ev divided by 1.24 ev, this will come out to be lambda. Correct. So now what you have to do, at this particular wavelength, you have to look at the absorption coefficient of a gallium arsenide sample. Correct. So we can refer to this figure, and at that particular wavelength, see, wavelength is on the x-axis, right? At that particular wavelength, we can look at the absorption coefficient over here and get that value. Correct. So I will just leave this as an exercise to you. I will just write the value that I have got. So this alpha will come out to be 7 into 10 to the power 3 per centimeter. Correct. So this is the value that we have got from for alpha. Alpha is given, hc by lambda is given, del n is given. So from here I can calculate the value of IV of 0, which is nothing but the power density. Correct. So IV of 0 is nothing but del n into 1 by alpha, correct, into hc by lambda. So if I just substitute the values, IV of 0 will be what? So del n equal to del p is 5 into 10 to the power 15. 1 by alpha is 1 upon 7 into 10 to the power 3. What is the hc by lambda factor that I have? So the hc by lambda is nothing but this 1.65 electron volts, correct, into 1.65. This is electron volts. I have to multiply it with the charge of an electron. 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19. Correct. So the value of IV of 0, if you calculate, right, it will come out to be around 0.9428 watts per centimeter square. This is the answer for the part number A. Correct. I will highlight this as a equation number A. Correct. I hope till this point it is very much clear to you. Now let's look at the second question. At what distance in the semiconductor does the generation rate drop to 10% of that of the surface? So first of all, let me explain why the generation rate will drop. Okay. So if I just look at this formula, now you also know that the IV of x is nothing but IV of 0 into e to the power minus alpha x. Correct. Alpha is the absorption coefficient. So if I just write this for g dash of x will be what? It will be alpha by h mu into IV of 0 into e to the power minus alpha x. Correct. You can clearly see that the generation rate is a function of a distance. Now why does it make intuitive sense? Because you know that when I incident a power, like when I shine the light on the semiconductor, the number of photons that are getting absorbed, they decay exponentially along the length of the semiconductor or along the thickness of the semiconductor, depending on how you are shining the light. Correct. Now if the number of photons that are getting absorbed are decaying exponentially with the length, correct, then who is going to generate the electron hole pairs? They are generated by the absorbed photons only. If the absorbed photons decay exponentially, then that means even the electron hole pairs, the number of electron hole pairs that I am generating, even that is gonna decay exponentially. Correct. So I have just given you the viewpoint from the two things. One is the formula and one is the intuition that we always like to have. Correct. So now what they are asking is, what I can do, I can just write this stuff. What is this stuff over here? I can also write this as g dash of 0. Correct. How can I write this as g dash of 0? If I just substitute x equal to 0 over here, this term will be gone, this term will become equal to 1, and g dash of 0 will become equal to this constant. Correct. Now what I can do, I can write this as g dash of x is nothing but the g dash of 0 into e to the power minus alpha x. Correct. I can write it like that. Now what they have asked, they are asking me at what distance in the semiconductor does the generation rate drop to 10% of its value at the surface. That means g dash of x is 10 by 100 of g dash of 0. I just have to substitute this over here. I will get my answer. 10 by 100 into g dash of 0 is equal to g dash of 0 into e to the power minus alpha x. Correct? Now what I have to do? I have to take the log on both the sides. Correct? So what I can do is ln of maybe minus ln of 100 by 10 is equal to minus alpha x. Correct? So x will be what? 1 by alpha into ln of 100 by 10. What is alpha value? Alpha we have already calculated, 7 into 10 to the power 3, right? 7 into 10 to the power 3 into ln of 10. So now if we calculate this distance, right, it is very easy to calculate. So this answer will come out to be around 3.289 micrometer. This is the distance at which the generation rate will just drop to 10% of its original value. Correct? I hope this question is also very much clear to you. Now we will look at this very interesting problem that came in the GATE exam 2019 in the electronics and communication paper. So now what they have given is, let's see, a germanium sample of dimension 1 centimeter cross 1 centimeter is illuminated with a power density of a power of 20 milliwatt. So, and this came from a laser light which is having a wavelength of 600 nanometer. Correct? So this is what has been shown over here. The illuminated sample surface has a 100 nanometer thickness of lossless silicon dioxide layer that reflects the 1/4 of the incident light. Correct? So if I just what I will do to make this question a little bit simpler, I will just draw a section like this. Correct? This is from where I was actually injecting the power, right? What is this? This is SiO2 air interface. SiO2 air interface. Correct? Similarly, I will just draw one more vertical line over here. This is what? This is germanium SiO2 interface. Correct? And I will just draw one more line. What is this? This is end of germanium sample. End of germanium sample. What do I mean by that? This is nothing but this boundary. Correct? Or I can write this, or I can also write this as germanium to air interface. Correct? Because this is air in the outside. Correct? I can write it as germanium to air interface. Now what I was doing, see, I was incidenting almost 20 milliwatts of power from here. Correct? Out of this, 1/4 of the power got reflected by this SiO2 air interface itself. By the way, if you just want to know the reason why some power will get reflected, then note that the refractive index of true materials, correct, the air and the refractive index of silicon dioxide are different. Correct? So you must have studied this in a high school physics and all. Correct? So some light will also be reflecting back. Not all of it will be getting passed from here. Correct? So how much I have transmitted? I have transmitted close to 20 into 3 by 4 milliwatts from here. Now what actually happens when I read just germanium to silicon interface, silicon dioxide interface? So what they have written is, from the remaining light, 1/3 of the power is reflected from the silicon dioxide germanium interface. Correct? So that means 20 into 3 by 4, this was the power that came to this interface. Correct? Out of this, 1/3 of the power, right, it reflected back. This much of the power reflected back from this germanium to silicon dioxide interface. Correct? So if 1/3 of the power got reflected back, correct, and so what happened to the remaining 2/3 of the power? So 1/3 is absorbed in the germanium layer and 1/3 is transmitted through the other side of the sample. What do I mean by other side of the sample? That means it passed out of the germanium sample over here. Correct? So that means from this interface, I have how much? I have 20 into 3 by 4 into 2 by 3 milliwatt that actually got transmitted out of this germanium to silicon dioxide interface, and out of this also, right, 1/3 of it got absorbed in the thickness of the germanium material, and I got out only with 20 into 3 by 4 into 1 by 3 of the power out of the germanium material. That is power that was injected into the air from the germanium sample. Correct? Any doubts till here? Because this was a little bit complicated. If you guys have any doubts, please let me know, because if this is not clear, then the question, there is no point in taking the question. Is everything clear up to this point? Any doubts? Do you want me to explain anything in this question, because this was a very important question that came in the GATE exam? I just need some confirmation, or else I won't be able to go ahead with the question. Do you want me to explain any part in this question again?
No, sir.
Okay, great. So okay, so now we have found out the powers at each and every point. Now what they are asking, if the absorption coefficient of the germanium at 600 nanometer wavelength, because we have transmitted a wavelength of 600 nanometer from here, correct? So this has been given as 3 into 10 to the power 4 per centimeter, and the band gap of the germanium is 0.66 electron volt. So they are asking me to calculate the thickness of the germanium layer, which is rounded off up to 3 decimal places, correct? So what has actually happened, let's see, correct? So now I was actually incidenting a 20 into 3 by 4 into 2 by 3 milliwatts of power. That this is what got injected from the SiO2 to the germanium interface into the germanium material, correct? So the IV of X that we have, correct? So if I define my over here, if I define my IV of 0, and over here at this point I will define my IV of T, because this is the thickness of the germanium layer, correct? So my IV of 0, that is the power that is getting injected into the the germanium material at the surface over here. This is nothing but 20 into 3 by 4 into 1 into 2 by 3 milliwatts that I got from here, correct? Now the power that is coming out from here, it will be denoted by IV of T. This is this power, right? The power that is actually getting what I can say injected out from the germanium material into the air interface, and this is what, this is 20 into 3 by 4 into 1 by 3 milliwatts, correct? Now what is the relation between these two? We know that the power density, that whatever I will be transmitting, it decays exponentially inside the semiconductor material, correct? What I will do, let me just highlight this as 1, let me just highlight this as a 2. I will move on to the next page now, correct? We know that IV of T is nothing but IV of 0 into e to the power minus alpha t, correct? So let me highlight it as equation number 3. So what I will do, I will just substitute 1 and 2 into 3, correct? From 1 and 2 and 3, my IV of T was what? 20 into 3 by 4 into 1 by 3 is equal to, IV of 0 is this value. This will be what? 20 into 3 by 4 into 2 by 3 into exponential of minus alpha t, correct? So 20 got cancelled, 3 by 4 got cancelled, even the 3 and 3 got cancelled. What I am left with is half is equal to e to the power minus alpha t. Now if I take the log, correct? If I take the log, minus of ln 2 will be what? Minus of alpha t. Minus minus got cancelled, hence my thickness became what? 1 by alpha into ln 2. What is the value of alpha? The alpha they have given as 3 into 10 to the power 4, correct? 1 upon 3 into 10 to the power 4 into ln 2, correct? Now if you calculate this value, right, this thickness will come out to be this thickness will come out to be around 0.231 micrometer, correct? The basis of solving this question was only using this formula. The only thing that you had to know was how much of the power was injected from the silicon dioxide into the germanium, and how much of it came out of the germanium sample, correct? So this is what just a basic logic and aptitude kind of question they have mixed with the formula just to make the question little bit complicated. That's it. Correct. So I hope this question was very much clear. If you guys have any doubts, please feel free to poke me at any point. Correct. So now the next thing that we had studied was something called as the spectral irradiance, right? So now why is this so important? Why have to study so many terms? Correct. So you studied something called as the photon flux. Correct. And I told you that the photon flux is very important because it helps us to calculate the generation rate of the electron hole pairs, from which I will get the generation of the excess carriers, and these excess carriers are what is gonna constitute the current in my optoelectronic devices. Correct. Now from where did this photon flux came? We also have to see that. Correct. So this photon flux actually came from the graph of this spectral irradiance. This curve that you are seeing over here, so this has been drawn for the sunlight. Okay, so what I have drawn over here is nothing but the power density. This spectral irradiance is nothing but the power density per unit of wavelength. That is how much of power I am getting per unit wavelength. Now why is it so important? Why I have to do this? Why I have to get a graph which will show me how much of power is present per unit wavelength? Because you know that not all the wavelengths, not light of all the wavelengths will be absorbed by the semiconductor material. Correct. There is a lambda cutoff that is present. Correct. Lambda, what do I mean by lambda cutoff? The light which is having a wavelength smaller than the lambda cutoff, only those lights will be absorbed by the semiconductor material, or in other words, light which is having energy greater than the band gap energy, only those photons will get absorbed. Correct. So now if you look over here, correct, so now if I just take a wavelength, what is the Eg of the silicon? It is 1.12 electron volt. So the lambda cutoff is 1.1 micrometer. Only those wavelengths which is having only those photons which is having a wavelength lesser than 1.1 micrometer, only they will get absorbed. That is why sir has drawn a line over here. Correct. Only photons which are present in this region only those are gonna get absorbed. Correct. The other part is not of relevance. So I can directly discard the region which is present on the right side of this right side of this what you can say, this highlighted area. I can right away reject it because my semiconductor material will act as a transparent for this particular wavelengths. Now I have to first know what is the distribution of the light source that I am using to shine the light on the semiconductor. Distribution in the sense how much power is there in per unit wavelength. Correct. Only then I can tell, okay, the total power that will be useful, which will be getting absorbed by the semiconductor material. I can just integrate this much area. Correct. I can just integrate maybe if I just take the 1.1 micrometer over here, then only this much power I will actually integrate, and this will become my total power now. Correct. So even though the total power, if I just integrate the whole curve over here, correct, I will get a total power, no doubt. But out of that, only this much power will be useful if I am designing optoelectronic devices out of my silicon. Correct. So this is why the spectral irradiance is very important. And one more reason why we use spectral irradiance is to characterize the light source. Characterize the light source. What do I mean by that? What are the different light sources that you have heard? Of course, one is the sunlight. Correct. You may have heard about the lamps that are present at your home. The third one is the laser. Correct. So I have to know at which wavelength, what are the wavelengths of my interest from the semiconductor material, and then I have to go back to the spectral irradiance of the light source from which the light is being shined on the semiconductor material. Only from that I will get the useful power which will give me the photons that will generate the electron hole pairs. Correct. I hope the importance of the spectral irradiance curve is very much clear to you. Correct. So now what we'll do, we will move on to the concept of solar cells now. We will take a break in 5 or 10 minutes. Okay. So now we'll move on to the concept of solar cells. So this was one of the first optoelectronic devices that we have studied in this particular week or in this particular course as well. Correct. So now what we are doing, see, our job is to take this light energy. What does the solar cell do? It takes the light energy and converts it into electrical energy. Correct. This electrical energy will be what? This electrical energy will be given across some load. That load has been represented by a load resistor that is present over here. Correct. Now what actually happens if I shine the light, on a reverse, or if I shine the light on the PN junction, correct, I have not biased this, I have just taken the PN junction over here. What I'm doing is I am shining the light on top of this semiconductor material. You know that because there exist immobile charges in the depletion region, there exists an electric field that is directed in this direction. Correct. Now when I shine the light, correct, depending on the wavelength of the light and all, I will get the generation of electron hole pairs. Correct. Then what will happen, since the electric field is directed in this direction, electrons will move in this direction, the holes will move in this left direction. Correct. So I will get a current in the same direction where the movement of holes is happening, and this is what has been shown over here. So the current will flow something like this. Correct. What is this current? You can call this as a photocurrent maybe. Correct. Why the photocurrent? Because that current was generated because of the photons that are getting absorbed in the semiconductor material. Now since I have connected a load across this PN junction, what will happen when this current that you are seeing over here, when this current starts to flow through this resistor, it will develop a potential in this particular direction. Correct. This will be positive, this will be negative. Now because of the potential that is developed across this load resistor, you can see that my PN junction is getting forward bias. Correct. When the PN junction gets forward bias, it will generate the current according to this particular equation. Correct. It will generate the current according to this particular equation. So the net forward bias current that I will be having is of course this current, but along with that I have to subtract this photocurrent from here. Correct. That is why a minus IL is coming over here. Now two things can happen. So what we can do, I can make this load resistor to be 0. Correct. So that means this value of V will be 0. If this V is 0, that means if there is no potential that is forward biasing the PN junction, this will become 0 and the total current will be nothing but this minus IL. Correct. This is what we call as a short circuit current. Correct. This is what we call as a short circuit current. I can do one more thing. I can open circuit over here so that no total current flows through the semiconductor material. Correct. Current cannot flow through the open circuit, right? So I can make this I total to be 0. If I make this I total to be 0, I will get a value for this voltage over here, and this is what I am calling as an open circuit voltage. Of course you have to take the log and all to remove the exponential, but this is what I call as a open circuit voltage. Correct. I hope it is okay. Just give me a minute, somebody wants to join. Yeah. So now this is what we got as open circuit voltage as well as the short circuit current. Now what I will do, if I try to plot the current versus voltage characteristics, correct, if I try to plot it, what I have, first of all, when my voltage was 0, I got this minus short circuit current that I got, correct, but its value is negative. That's why I got a point over here. If I take this open circuit voltage, at that point my current is 0. So I will get a plot like this. Now if you just join this with graph of having this exponential nature, you will get a curve which is highlighted in the red figure. And this dotted curve that you are seeing over here, this was for the PN junction which was just forward bias. Correct. So you can see my curve is now present in the 4th quadrant. This is the question that now I have asked over here. We have to clear this. Why this 4th quadrant is so important. So now let me just quickly draw the quadrants over here. This was my V, this was my I. Correct. So V and I both are positive over here. So my product of V and I is also positive. If I take over here, then my P is negative over here. Correct. Over here, if I look, again my P is positive because my current is also negative, my voltage is also negative. If I look over here, my power is what? Power is negative because voltage is positive and current is negative. Correct? What does this negative power signifies? So this, see, when your curve was present over here, right, it was telling you that I had to give an energy to the circuit to I had to give an energy to the circuit. This power is equal to negative signifies that the circuit is giving me the energy. Circuit is giving me the energy. Now energy can neither be created, can nor be destroyed. It can only be converted from one form to another. I have taken the light energy from the sun, and that energy I have converted into what you can say electrical energy. Correct? So this is a freely available energy to me. Correct? There is no limit. Nobody can restrict me from taking the energy from the sun. Correct? It is just getting converted into the electrical energy, and this is why the graph is present in the fourth quadrant. It is suggesting that when you take this material and connect a load across it, you will get the power delivered to the load instead of burning the power in this device itself. I will just repeat this statement once again. Once you arrange a circuit like this, correct, instead of having this device consuming the power, this device is actually delivering the power to your load. Okay, that's why this is what the significance of having a IV characteristics present in your fourth quadrant means. Okay, so we have solved both these questions, how the solar cell is actually working and what are the significance of quadrants in this IV characteristics. So let me know if you guys have any question. Now let's connect the dots. Okay, let's try to connect the dots so that everything becomes very much clear. So now we will try to relate how the spectral irradiance is now actually helping me to calculate the, what you can say, to get the short circuit current values basically. Correct? So now we have the spectral irradiance which we use to characterize the light source. In this particular case, it is nothing but your sunlight that you have. Correct? So from this spectral irradiance, correct? From this spectral irradiance, I can, what wavelengths are of interest to me? If I make a solar cell out of silicon, this is where only these photons, correct? Only these photons are useful to me because they will help in creation of electron hole pairs. Correct? So now what I can do, I can only take these many photons from where? From this spectral irradiance. What I will do now, so we have studied this formula. What is this formula? So this is nothing but your spectral irradiance, watts per meter square per nanometer. Correct? And now if you multiply it with the wavelength, what do I mean by wavelength? Just take a particular wavelength, right, over here, and just take a very small width around that wavelength. Correct? And then just multiply this nanometer term that you are seeing, it will get cancelled from the units, and what you will be left with is watt per meter square. What is this? This is nothing but my power density. This is nothing but my power density. And now, so that is why that delta lambda is present in this formula. Correct? So now if you multiply this delta lambda over here, you will get the units in watts per meter square. Now if I divide the power density by the energy of each photon, what I will get is the total number of photons that I am actually incidenting. Correct? So now from that you will get the photon flux which is represented by this phi over here. Correct? So this is how this formula has been constructed. Now once I got the photon flux, correct, how did I get it? I got it from the spectral irradiance. Correct? I got it from the spectral irradiance. Once I have the photon flux, correct, I can of course calculate the IV of x from here. IV of x is nothing but just multiply the photon flux with the energy of each photon. I got the value of IVX from here. From the semiconductor material, I know the absorption coefficient, correct, and h mu I know. H mu I know. You can also think IV of x by h mu as photon flux. You can consider this as photon flux as well, so that you don't have to multiply it with the energy. So now from the spectral irradiance, I got the value of the photon flux over here, and from the photon flux, if I multiply it with the absorption coefficient, I will get the value of this G dash, that is nothing but the generation rate of electron hole pairs. Now if I multiply the generation rate with the carrier lifetime, correct, then I will get the excess carrier concentration. And now this excess carrier concentration that is generated in the semiconductor material, now this will dictate what is the current that will be flowing in that particular optoelectronic device. correct? These excess carriers when exposed to a particular field, maybe the depletion region field or maybe biasing maybe have applied, correct? So now this will dictate how much current will be flowing now, and this is the same current that sir has shown over here, correct? So I hope it is very much clear from how the graph of spectral irradiance we actually reached to a value of the current that is actually getting flown because of the generation of excess carriers in the semiconductor material. I hope this picture is completely clear. You don't have any more doubts over here. If you have, then please feel free to stop me over here, correct? So now what we will do, we will take a short 5 minutes break over here, correct, and we will sharply begin at around 7:10 p.m. So now the break starts now. Okay, we are good to go. Just a moment. Okay, now let me just turn on the laser pointer. Yeah, so if you look at the curve, right, of the solar cell, what you can see is if I take this particular point, at this point I'm getting the open circuit voltage, but my current is 0, correct? So the product of V into I, if I look at this point, is 0. If I look at this particular point, I'm getting a current, but I don't have any voltage over here, correct? I will get I will get again the product of V into I to be 0. So now in between, if you look, there will come a point where the product of V into I, see over here it is becoming 0, over here it is becoming 0, correct? So somewhere it must increase and somewhere it must peak out before reaching to 0 eventually. So at this particular point, this is my maximum power point. This is what I'm talking about. So this is the point where if I have this particular voltage and I value, I will get the maximum power that I can deliver from this PN junction to my load that I have shown over here by a load resistor, correct? Now if we try to calculate the value of Vm and Im at this particular point, how can we do it? So now this is my total current that I had, and what is the power? The power delivered will be nothing but the total current into the voltage, the V that I have. So now if I just multiply this I total with the V, and now if I try to calculate a voltage at which this power will become maximum, then I have to take a derivative at that particular point and make it equal to 0, correct? So if you do that and if you refer it from the lecture material, ultimately you will be getting this particular equation. Let me just turn on the pen. Yeah, so if you do it, then we will be left with this particular equation. You can see it is not a linear equation, it's a transcendental equation, correct? So that means your IL is not only a linear or quadratic polynomial function, you have an exponential as well as the multiplication of 1 plus q v by kt over here. So you just cannot solve it directly, you have to take a use of scientific calculator or some software to solve this particular point, to solve this particular equation, correct? Now one more thing that we define, okay, so if I have a IV curve, I will get this Vm and Im over here, correct? I will get this Vm and Im. So if I just draw the projections, then I will get a rectangle, one rectangle like this, correct? Again if I take 2 points VOC and ISC, again if I take their projections, I will again get a second rectangle. So now if we divide the area of the two rectangles, correct, this is what we defined as a fill factor. This is what we defined as a fill factor, and I want this number to be as high as possible, maybe close to 1. What happens when this number is close to 1? These two rectangles completely overlap with each other, correct? But that is never possible. In the practically you will get this number as 0.7 to 0.10. Just remember this formula for the fill factor because we will be extensively using it while solving the numericals, okay? So now apart from the fill factor, one more very important term is to define the efficiency of the solar cell, right? So now how did we define the efficiency? The total power that is actually getting delivered to the load resistor, and compared to that how much of the input power is being incident on the solar cell, correct? If I just take the ratio of these two terms, then I will get my efficiency. How much is the power that is being delivered to the load? It is nothing but the product of Vm into Im. See, I have to operate at the maximum power point, right? I have to operate at maximum power point, correct? So I'll just highlight as MPT, correct, maximum power point. So now only when I operate at the maximum power point, then my efficiency of the solar cell will be maximum, correct. We have already seen the maximum power is nothing but product of Vm into Im. Now these numbers are little bit difficult to measure, correct. So that's why what did we did, we used the fill factor formula from the previous case. And what did we wrote? We wrote Vm into Im is equal to fill factor into ISC into VOC. These numbers are readily available in the, what you can say, the data sheet of the solar cell. So now if you just substitute, then this is the formula for the efficiency of solar cell that you will be getting, correct. I hope this is very much clear. Just remember this formula very clearly. And one more thing that you might ask is, how can I increase this efficiency? So I can do two things. One is I can increase the short circuit current, other is I can try to increase the open circuit voltage, correct. How can I increase the short circuit current? This short circuit current is nothing but actually the current that is generated because of the shining of light, correct. Now if I want my material to have many electron hole pairs generated because of the photons, then I have to make sure that my semiconductor material is absorbing as many photons as possible. See, for the material made out of silicon, I was only absorbing these many photons that are highlighted in the yellow section by the yellow area, correct. Now if I reduce my band gap of the semiconductor, correct, if I reduce my band gap of the semiconductor, I can even absorb photons till this particular area as well. So now if my material is absorbing a lot of photons, that means a lot of electron hole pairs will get generated. A generation of lot of electron hole pairs means I will get a lot of short circuit current, correct. But what are the other consequences? So I am saying you lower down your Eg, correct. I am saying you lower down the Eg of your material. But what is the other consequence that you have? So if you lower down the Eg of your material, correct, then you must have seen that in the PN junction, the reverse saturation current that you have, right, it increases rapidly if you lower down the band gap of the material, correct. Now this reverse saturation current is present over here, IS, correct. Now to increase the short circuit current, if you lower the band gap of your material, your reverse saturation current is increasing. If your reverse saturation current increases, that means this term will decrease. That means your open circuit voltage is gonna decrease now. So to increase the ISC, when you are trying to increase ISC, the open circuit voltage is decreasing over here, correct. So that is the problem. And if I take a higher Eg material, correct, what it will do? Higher Eg material will lower down the value of reverse saturation current. That means my VOC will increase, but once, correct, but if my VOC increases, you can see this happened because of taking the higher Eg material. That means what? If I take the higher Eg material, then this yellow region that you are seeing over here, that is the photons that are getting absorbed, even this region will get reduced now. If the number of photons getting absorbed is decreased, then the electron hole pair generation rate will also decrease. So the excess carrier concentration that is generated because of the shining of photons, now since that is gonna get reduced, my current that I will be getting, even this is going to get reduced now. So what you can see over here, I cannot have a material with very low Eg, I cannot have a material with high Eg. Somewhere there is an optimum value of band gap which will give me a maximum product of this VOC and ISC. Now if you are trying to find it out, it is called as the Shockley-Quasar limit. So this tells us the optimum band gap which will give me the maximum efficiency for the solar cell. And you can see that for this AM 1.5, AM 1.5 is nothing but, this is nothing but air mass index. If you are not sure about what it is, so then please go through the lecture materials. So it is just telling you that how much of the light you are getting at the surface of the earth when the angle between the earth's surface and the sun is around 45 degree, correct. So now this band gap comes out to be 1.34 electron volt and the maximum theoretical efficiency comes out to be 33.7%. Now if you have a silicon which is band gap of 1.12 eV, then it can give a maximum efficiency of 32%. But because there are a lot of non-idealities that are present in the semiconductor material, like the reflection loss, what is this reflection loss? I hope from the numerical it was very much clear what is the reflection loss. You can see there is a refractive index 1, there is a refractive index 2, there is a refractive index 3. So not all the light from here will gonna get transmitted or get absorbed. Some of it will be getting reflected back because of the differences in the refractive index. Correct? Just give me a second. Yeah, because of the reflection loss, also you have to take the metal contacts. So now if you take the metal contacts, there is going to be a series resistance. The power will be dissipated across this resistance, so you will not be able to deliver the complete power to the load as well. Correct? So these will degrade the efficiency, and in the practical cases you will see that the efficiency of the solar cell will not be more than 18 to 20% for the silicon. So this efficiency is nothing but if I am shining a light having a particular density of watt per meter square, correct, and my solar cell has a particular area, correct, that means I am transmitting some maybe x watts of power. Now how much of the power now I am able to deliver to the load? If you take that ratio, then that is your 20%. Correct? I hope it is very much clear. Now once these concepts are clear, now this will actually help us to solve a lot of good numericals that came in the GATE exam for the solar cells. Correct? So now let's try to solve these numericals. So what is this fourth problem telling us to do? A solar cell illuminated uniformly with a solar light power of 100 milliwatt per centimeter square. The solar cell has an area of 3 centimeter square and the fill factor of 0.7. The open circuit voltage is 0.5 volt and the short circuit current is 180 milliampere. The maximum efficiency of the device is. Correct? So now how can I calculate the efficiency? So my efficiency is nothing but, we have already seen, product of Vm into Im. Correct? The product of Vm into Im upon the input power that I am applying at the solar cell, correct, into 100. Correct? So now I have to find this Vm into Im, but this Vm into Im has not been given to me directly. I have to do some work to find the product of Vm into Im over here. Correct? So can I use some other formula which will give me the product of Vm into Im? One more thing is given, is the fill factor. What was the fill factor? So the fill factor was nothing but Vm into Im upon Voc into Isc. Correct? So the fill factor has been given to me, the open circuit voltage has been given to me, the short circuit current has been given to me, so I can find the product of Vm into Im from this particular formula and then substitute it back into the equation number 1 to get the efficiency of the solar cell. Correct? A very simple thing to do. So let's try to calculate. The product of Vm into Im will be what? Fill factor into Voc into Isc. Correct? So Vm into Im will become what? Fill factor is close to 0.7. The open circuit current is open circuit voltage is 0.5 volts and the short circuit current is 180 milliampere. Correct? So if you calculate this value, this will come out to be around 0.063 Vm into Im. Let me highlight it as equation number 3. Now what I will do, substitute 3 in 1. So what will I get? The efficiency will be what? 0.063, correct, into the power that I am incidenting. But this is watts. The incident power has been given as watts per centimeter square. I have to multiply it with the area to get the units in the watts. Correct? So now this pin will be multiplied with the area. So 100 into 10 to the power minus 3, right? This has to be multiplied by the factor of 3 over here. Correct? So this will be what? 0.063 divided by 0.3. So this efficiency will be coming out to be around 0.21, or since they have asked in the percentage term, so the efficiency will be coming out to be around 21%. I hope it is very much clear till this particular point. Again, a easy numerical. If you have any doubts, then please feel free to poke me at any point. Now let's move on to the next question. Again, the question came in the GATE exam 2018. Now let's look at what this question is telling us. A solar cell of area 1 centimeter square operating at 1 sun intensity. What is this number 1 sun intensity? It has been given over here, 100 milliwatts per centimeter square, right? So now this solar cell has a short circuit current of 20 milliampere and an open circuit voltage of 0.65 volts. Assuming room temperature operation and the thermal equivalent voltage of 26, this is nothing but your KT by Q value, correct? The open circuit voltage in volts correct up to 2 decimal places at 0.2 sun intensities, correct? So now what we have to do, okay, first of all we can do one thing. They are asking me to calculate the open circuit voltage, so I have to use the open circuit voltage formula. What is the open circuit voltage formula? Vt ln 1 plus IL by IS, right? Now what is this load current? So this is nothing but your photo current. What do I mean by photo current? The current which is generated because of the light, the photons that are getting shine, correct? And if I just tell you from the spectral irradiance that we have seen, yeah, from if I just look at this graph, correct, then what it is telling you is that if I if I decrease the intensity of the light, correct, if I decrease the intensity of the light, decreasing the intensity of the light is nothing but, see, energy of each photon is hc by lambda into number of photons n, correct? This is nothing but your intensity of the light that you have. That means what I am doing, if I am fixing the wavelength of the light, if I am decreasing the intensity, that means I am decreasing the number of photons that are present in that particular packet that I am sending. That is, the intensity is decreasing because of the lesser number of photons. Now if I have the lesser number of photons, then if the absorption coefficient of the semiconductor material remains same at a particular wavelength, then what does this mean? The lesser, and since I have decreased the number of photons, then the number of electron hole pairs that will get generated because of the shining of light, even that is gonna get reduced, and that will actually decrease the excess carrier concentration proportionally, correct? So what I am trying to say is, just a minute, what I am trying to say is this this IL that you are seeing over here, it is directly proportional to the light intensity. This IL that you are seeing over here, it is directly proportional to the light intensity, correct? This is an intuition. How can I do this from the formula? So the efficiency you have already seen, correct? The efficiency, what was the efficiency? It was nothing but, just let me just write, IL by Q upon P in by H mu, correct? How much of the current I am generating by incidenting the light of a particular power, correct? From here, if I just rearrange the equation, what I will be getting is IL is nothing but efficiency into Q by H into mu into P in, correct? Let's say this is 2. So this is what we got from the intuition, that the load, that is the load current that I will be getting, is proportional to the light intensity. From this formula it is very much clear that as the intensity of the light decreases, my IL will decrease proportionally, correct? There is no power and all, it is directly decreasing in the same order of magnitude, correct? So now what I can write, see, I can do one thing now. If I just write V open circuit voltage, right? V open circuit at what you can say 1 sun. So I will just write P in is equal to 1 sun over here. This is what? This is Vt is nothing but 0.026 into ln of 1 plus load current that I am getting when P in is equal to 1 sun intensity divided by the IS, correct? So now this is what I am writing over here, and this value is what? 0.65, because this has been given in the question. 0.65 is equal to 0.026 ln of 1 plus IL at P in is equal to 1 sun intensity divided by IS. Okay, so this is what has been given to me now. Now what I have to find, let me just highlight as equation number 1. What I have to find is open circuit voltage when P in is 0.2 sun. So now again if I write equation 0.026 ln of 1 plus the load current at P in is equal to 0.2 sun intensity divided by IS. So let's say this is equation number 2. Correct? Now to solve the equation number 2, I have to see how can I relate this term. How can I relate this term which I am highlighting with this particular term over here. With this particular term over here. Correct? So now what I am going to do, I will do one thing now. Since I know that IL is proportional to P in, IL at P in is equal to 1 sun intensity divided by IL at when input power was around 0.2 sun intensity. This will be nothing but 1 upon 0.2. This will be equal to 5. Correct? So what can I write now? So I can easily write IL when the load P in is equal to 0.2 sun. This will be 1 by 5 times of IL when P in is equal to 1 sun. I can also do one thing, I can also divide on both the sides by the saturation current, the reverse saturation current. Correct? Let me highlight it as equation number 3. Now what I will do, if you look at the equation number 2, I am trying to make it in terms of equation number 1 over here, because equation number 1 value I know already from here, right? So if I can write this IL divided by IS at 0.2 sun intensity in terms of IL by IS at 1 sun intensity, then I can actually get the answer. Correct? So now I will just substitute this equation number 3. I will just write it. Substitute 3 in 2. What will I get now? I will get, just a minute, V open circuit at P in is equal to 0.2 sun intensity is equal to 0.026 ln of 1 plus, this was the term that was present in the equation number 2. Correct? This was the term that was present in the equation number 2. Now I will replace it with this term over here. 0.2 into IL at P in is equal to 1 sun intensity divided by IS. Correct? So let me highlight this as equation number 4. Now these terms that you are seeing over here and even this term that you are seeing over in the equation number 1. So the ratio of IL by IS will always be greater than 1, because this saturation current is almost 10 to the power minus 12. And now this current IL, it will be some milliampere or hundreds of microamperes maybe. Correct? So now if you take the ratio, this term is much greater than 1. Correct? So now from 1 itself, I can write 0.65 to be approximately 0.026 ln of IL P in is equal to 1 sun divided by IS. Correct? So now again if I just write this equation number 4 by ignoring this one, this will come out to be 0.2 into IL at P in is equal to 1 sun by IS. Correct? So this is the open circuit voltage that I wanted at 0.2 sun intensity. Now if you just break this, ln of AB is nothing but ln A plus ln B. Correct? Unfortunately I don't have a space, so I have to use the next page now. So let me just write over here from previous numerical. So the open circuit voltage at 0.2 sun intensity is nothing but 0.026 ln of 0.2 plus 0.026 into ln of IL at 1 sun intensity divided by IS. And what is this factor? This factor I know. Correct? What is this factor? This is this factor, 0.65. Correct? So now this will be nothing but 0.026 times ln of 0.2 plus 0.65. Correct? So if you just solve this value if you just solve this value, then this VOC at 0.25 at 0.2 sun intensity, it will come out to be around 0.608 volts. So the open circuit voltage has now decreased, correct? And it makes sense because this term is negative over here, correct? So I hope this question is very clear. If you guys have any doubts, please feel free to poke me at any point. Okay, I will be going on with the next concept now of the photodiodes. Any doubts, please feel free to poke me. I may not be able to read the chat section. So now let's look at the what we have seen for the photodiodes. I won't go into a lot of concepts because of the lack of time. I still have to solve I guess one more numerical. So now if we look at the photodiodes, so first we studied the photoconductors, correct, which I have not shown over here. Then we went on to the photodiode made out of PN junction. Then we went to photodiode, correct. Then we went to the photodiode which was made up of PIN diode, correct. And now the reason we said that we wanted to make the response of the photodiode very fast, correct. So now why we want to make the response of the photodiode to be very fast? Because let me just tell you, the cables that you have seen, I have shown you these parallel racks, right? And I have shown you that there are optical cables, optical fiber cables that were coming out, right? So now these were carrying the data rates at 40 to 60 gigabits per second. This is a very huge value. This is a very huge value. Just to tell you, if you have a Jio fiber or if you have a Hathway router at your home, it's the internet speed that you will be getting, it will be less than 100 Mbps. I'm talking about 40-60 gigabits per second. Okay, so now if they are sending the data with such a high speed, my photo detector first of all should be having that much capability to respond to a signal which is varying in such a fast manner, correct. That's why I want to design the photodiodes which will operate at a very high speed, correct. So now what did we do? We first took the PN junction, we reverse biased it, correct. Why did we reverse bias it? Because we said that if the light is shining on this PN junction, correct, then what is going to happen? First of all, if I just talk about the depletion region, there is a very strong reverse bias electric field that is present over here. So the electrons will move to the n side, the holes will be moving to this particular side, correct, and you will get a current because of the PN junction in the reverse bias. That is because of the when the photons are shining over here, you will be getting electron hole pairs. Because of the strong electric field, those electron hole pairs will be moving to different direction, and that will constitute a current, correct. And what happens to the light? What happens to the carriers that are generated over here? So now majority carriers will not be affected, but if you talk about the minority carriers, since delta n is always equal to delta p, correct, electrons and holes will be generated in equal number. Since the minority carriers are very less over here, correct, you can see that there is a sharp increase in the minority carriers on n side as well and on p side as well, correct. So minority carriers will be increasing over here. So now what we expect? We expect a current from here as well because of the generation of minority carriers. We expect a current from here as well, but a very important thing is the current which is generated because of the carriers generated in the depletion region, correct, because this will give me an immediate fast response, correct. Why am I saying that? Because there exists a very strong electric field. Any free carriers generated over here, they will be completely swept out on the other side, correct. So this term that you are seeing over here, this Q into W into GL, this is what we call as the fast term. Fast term means this term responds very quickly to the changes in the intensity of the light that is coming over here. Now why will the light intensity change? So just imagine that I have two intensity levels of the light, I1 and I0. This represents a bit 0 and this represents a bit 1. Now if I have a sequence 1 0 1 1 0, then I have to do what? I have to send 1, I have to send 0, I have to send two ones, and then I have to send a 0. So what you can see is that I can do some kind of amplitude modulation in the intensity of the light, and I will be able to transmit the bit stream that I want to transmit from one CPU core, so from one of the CPUs or GPUs to other place in the data center. correct? So I want this thing to react immediately, and so this is what I am calling as a term which will respond very quickly, because electric field already exists in this particular term, correct? So now after that we move to the pin diode and we asked ourselves how can we make this diode really fast, correct? So one of the things that we have is, if I am able to generate electron hole pairs in the region which has a large electric field, correct? If I am able to generate the electron hole pairs in the region which has a very large electric field, then that will respond immediately to the changes in the intensity of the light that actually I am applying on top of the photodiode, correct? So I want to make sure that there already exists the electric field. What about here? Electric field does not exist. These are neutral regions, correct? These are neutral regions. So now can I continuously increase the width of the depletion region? I will hit some boundary, correct? See, this depletion region is there, but I cannot increase it infinitely, correct? So now what can I do? I can create a pin diode. If you look at the charge diagram, correct, then I will get negative charges like this. Why did this happen? Because the holes from here moved into the intrinsic region, electrons from the n plus moved into the intrinsic region, so they left behind the positively exposed, what you can say, the phosphorus atoms, and on this side they left behind the negatively charged immobile boron atoms, correct? So that is the reason you have a negative immobile charge, you have a positive immobile charge. If you now just integrate it, correct, this is a step function, this is a step function, right? You will get a ramp if you integrate it. Then there is nothing over here, so this will remain constant, and there's a positive charge over here, correct? So you will get a on the opposite side, that way it will decrease. What you can see over here is that between these two particular things over here, I have a large electric field that is present without any depletion region. Depletion region already only exists over here, correct? Depletion region only exists over here, and there is a still electric field is there in the intrinsic region. Now any photons that I will be shining over here, the electron hole pairs generated over here, they will quickly respond because of the existence of electric field, correct? And if they respond quickly, that means what? I can detect a very fast, if I have a bit stream of 1010, which is having a rate of even 50 gigabits per second, since my photo detector is very fast now, I will still be able to convert these changes into the that is the change in the power intensity, that is the change in the power density of the light that I am shining into the electrical signal, correct? I hope this is very much clear. So now one important thing that will help us to solve the numericals is the responsivity of the photodiode, correct? So the responsivity of the photodiode is nothing but, if I am incidenting some photons on top of the, what you can say, the photodiode, correct, then correspondingly how much current I will be getting out of this photodiode, correct? What you are seeing over here, this number of photons is nothing but the photon flux that we have seen. What was the photon flux? Number of photons per centimeter square of area per second, correct? So now how can I write the flux? Flux is nothing but your P, correct? That is the incident power divided by the energy of each photon. This is energy, this is power, so that's why you have a units of second that are coming in the denominator over here, correct? Because there is only factor of time between the P and the E, correct? So now if I just substitute this photon flux with this P and h mu, correct, this is what this is the IPC that I got. Now if you replace this h mu, what is this h mu? H mu is nothing but hc by lambda, correct? I can also write it as 1.24 electron volt divided by lambda in micrometer, correct? If I just write it like this, then what it will become? Then if you just substitute this h mu back over here, then ultimately you will be gonna see that the responsivity that you have will be coming out to be this efficiency into lambda divided by 1.24, correct? This will come out to be efficiency into lambda divided by 1.24. Now how did we arrive at this number, correct? So this IPC and P, this is what your responsivity term consists of, correct? So if you just take this on this particular side, and then you will be left with only this particular part over here. Now if you substitute this 1.24 by 1.24 ev by lambda in this particular term, correct, then you will be left with this equation for the responsivity. What you can see over here is that the responsivity is actually directly proportional to the lambda, correct. So now we will see how our silicon photodiode will respond to the different wavelength. So now if I go to a lambda which is higher than maybe 1.1 micrometer, then that photon is not gonna get absorbed, correct. That photon is not gonna get absorbed, so I will not be getting any photocurrent. So the responsivity should fall off over there. From this equation you can see that the graph between the responsivity and the wavelength is a straight line, correct. Just look at the units of the responsivity. It's ampere per watts. From where did this come? The IPC that we have, if you divided it by the power, correct, then you will get these units. This is what your responsivity means. Now this should be ideal, but at a higher wavelength my absorption coefficient will be very low because the energy of the incident light will be smaller than the band gap. That's why it is falling like this, correct. That is why it is falling like this. And what happened over here? My energy was more than Eg, right? But for a same power density, correct, just give me a time. So the power density for the same power density, if I increase the energy of each photon, see, this power density is nothing but energy of photon into number of photons, correct. If I keep on decreasing my lambda, the energy of each photon is actually increasing, but my power density is remaining constant. What does this mean? The number of photons that I am shining are going down. If the number of photons that I am shining are going down, that means lesser number of electron hole pairs will be generated. If the lesser number of electron hole pairs will be generated, correct, what does this mean? Excess carrier concentration, even that will go down. And if this goes down, then my photocurrent that I will be getting, even that is gonna get down, correct. So that's why even at a smaller wavelength it falls. Actually it is not a straight line like this. So that's why you can see you have a regions where it increases, it peaks out, and again it decreases. For all the semiconductor materials that I have shown over here, you will get the same curve, correct. So just remember this formula for the responsivity with respect to the efficiency and all, correct. And we will solve the numerical now. Only one numerical I have for this particular responsivity and efficiency formula, and now we will try to solve that particular numerical. So now let's see what this numerical is now asking us. So this is the problem number 6. A photodiode has an area of 1 centimeter cross 1 centimeter and is illuminated by a monochromatic light with a wavelength of 780 nanometer, correct, and with a power density of 1000 watts per meter square. This is very huge number, right? It may look huge, but if you just convert this meter square into centimeter square, then it is just 100 milliwatts per centimeter square. Okay, so do not get fooled by this number. Just always consider the units, and this is a very standard unit, watts per centimeter square. Now at 300 Kelvin, the open circuit voltage is 0.683. What is the reverse saturation current assuming 100% quantum efficiency, correct. If I talk about the formula for the open circuit voltage, this value has been given to me. Vt I already know, correct. I neither know IL nor I know the IS value. So to calculate the reverse saturation current, I have to find this load current, correct. To get this value, I have to find the load current first, correct. To how can I find the load current now? So now this load current is nothing but the photocurrent that is being generated, correct. So they have given me one hint: assume 100% quantum efficiency. That means my eta is equal to 1, correct. Also they have given me the power density number. So can I use a formula which tells me the quantum efficiency as well as the power density of the light that is coming and hitting on the semiconductor surface, and can give me this load current? Of course I know the formula. This formula is nothing but the formula of responsivity, correct. So now if I just modify the formula a little bit, what I will get is IL by Q is nothing but P in by H mu. Correct? This is coming from the responsivity formula that we have seen over here. Correct? I am talking about this formula. I am just rearranging this. If I just take the Q on the this particular side, then I will be just left with P by H mu. What about the efficiency? Efficiency has been given as 100%. Correct? So I am left with this particular term now. Now if I can find the value of IL from this formula, I can substitute it in this formula and get the value of saturation current from here. Correct? So now let's try to do that. IL will be nothing but Q into P in by H mu. Correct? So now how can I find the value of H mu? H mu is nothing but Hc by lambda. Hc by lambda is nothing but 1.24 electron volt divided by lambda in micrometer. Correct? So this is 1.24. Lambda is given at 780 nanometer. This is 0.78 micrometers. Correct? So now if we just divide it, then this number will come out to be 1.589. 1.589 what? 1.589 electron volts. Okay. So now if I just what you can say, if we just try to substitute the value over here. So now this IL will be what? Q into value of P in is 100 milliwatts per centimeter square. Correct? See this 100 milliwatts per centimeter square. So this will be coming out to be what? 100 into 10 to the power minus 3 divided by H mu. H mu is 1.589 electron volts. So this is nothing but I have to multiply it with the factor of Q as well. Correct? 1.589 into Q. So this Q and Q will get cancelled. And now if you look at the value of IL, this will be coming out to be 0.0629 amperes. This will come out to be 0.0629 amperes. Now what I will do, I will take this equation number 1, I will take this equation number 2 and put the value of equation number 2 in equation number 1. I will just write it, substitute 2 in 1. Correct? So now open circuit voltage has been given as 0.683 volts. 0.683 is equal to Vt is what? 0.0259 into ln of 1 plus IL by IS. IL we have already calculated, 0.0629 by IS. Correct? This is what I am left with. So what I will do now, 0.683 by 0.0259 is equal to ln of 1 plus 0.0629 by IS. If I take exponential on both the sides, exponential of 0.683, 0.0259, correct, minus 1 will be 0.0629 by IS. Hence, IS will be what? 0.0629 divided by exponential of 0.683, 0.0259 minus 1. So if you calculate the value of IS, then this number will be coming out to be around 0.228 picoamperes, a very small value. Correct? Just to give you an example, this is 0.228 pico. This number that you are seeing over here, it was around what? It was 62.9 milliampere. You remember in the previous question I had used an approximation. I have ignored this number 1 in the previous question, right? So you can see if you take the ratio, this number is so huge compared to 1. And I hope it is very much clear now why the approximation of ignoring this one usually works in most of the cases. Okay, so this was the last problem for today, guys. If you guys have any questions, any doubts, that any concept that you have not understood for this week, please feel free to ask me. Were you able to at least relate why are we studying the optoelectronic devices, how it is related to the ChatGPT data center, why it is related to the optical fiber cables and all? Were you able to understand that concept at least? I just need some kind of confirmation, guys. Okay, great. Uh, any doubts in the concepts in the questions that I have solved till now?
No, sir.
No? Okay, good. Yeah, so somebody was saying something about the assignment 10. Can you please quickly tell me what was the question?
Yes, sir. It was about the structure and construction of
Okay, just give me a second. Let me just stop the